Hello there and welcome to All 24 News Midnight program coming to you live from Algiers. Here are today's headlines. Algerian President sends a message to the people on the occasion of Victory Day, praising Algeria's achievements at the external and internal levels. Also coming up, the United States acknowledges the shortcomings of Western security approach in line or in the Sahel region and bets on development solutions to end terrorism in the region. Turkey and Egypt launch a new path to restore relations and look forward to raising higher diplomatic ties between them to the level of ambassadors in the near future, also coming up. And later ahead in our news, Russian President is on a visit to Crimea, drone attacks on Ukraine intensified, and Turkey confirms the extension of the grain export agreement through the Black Sea. Those were today's top stories. Welcome to the details. First off in our news, Algerian President Mr. Abdelmadjid Tebboune sent on Saturday a message to the Algerian people on the occasion of the 61st anniversary of Victory Day on March 19th. President Tebboune reiterated his determination to build a strong Algeria through the revaluation of efforts and work and to consolidate the foundations of the country's security, saying he was convinced that what has been achieved so far is the result of commitment to the unity of ranks and the will to combine efforts. The President of the Republic said that the celebration of this day is a renewed opportunity from which energy is drawn to fight the aspects of misery and to put Algeria on the path of sustainable socio-economic and cultural development and engage effectively in the enhancement of partnerships with brotherly countries and friends. Moving on, the new Algerian Foreign Minister, Mr. Ahmed Attaf, said that President Abdelmadjid Tebboune informed him of his personal desire to raise foreign policy to decisive levels of efficiency and influence. In a speech after assuming his duties as Algerian Minister of Foreign Affairs, Mr. Attaf explained that the regional files are undergoing profound transformations and changes which necessitate Algerian diplomacy to be aware of all its consequences.
2 days ago, I was honored to meet the President of the Republic and heard directly from him his guidance, directives and instructions, which he aims to raise the country's foreign policy to critical levels of efficiency, leverage and influence.
The Algerian Foreign Minister stated that the world is experiencing multiple crises that threaten imbalances in the system of international relations, noting that the current circumstances are burdened with major challenges and dangers.
At the recent global level, there is a crisis of interconnectedness and a crisis in interconnectedness, and there is a crisis of globalization and a crisis in globalization, and there is a crisis in the so-called structure of collective security and the imbalances it warns of in the system of international relations. The circumstance is fraught with major challenges and stages full of dangers and risks.
In the same context, Mr. Attaf also stressed that the Algerian foreign policy is one of the pillars of the nation, which must be mobilized to preserve the country's interest and ensure its security and stability.
Our foreign policy's position in all of this is that it's one of the elements of the nation that must be mobilized in order to preserve the interests of our country and ensure the means of security, stability, and prosperity that we aspire to master with all rights and legitimacy.
Moving on to a different topic now. During his visit to Niger, U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken acknowledged the failure of the U.S. and French military approach in the Sahel region after failing to limit the presence of terrorist groups, some saying. This is happening at a time when French influence has receded in the Sahel and the continent in general. Here's Osama Ayadi with more.
On spur of a moment, the United States recognized the failings of the American and French military approach to eliminating the presence of terrorist groups in the Sahel region and Western Africa. From the Nigerian capital Niamey, U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken appeared acknowledging the inevitability of adopting a more comprehensive approach than the one that has proven its failure for years. After long joint military exercises held with the West African countries, Blinken calls for a more holistic, comprehensive approach, a move away from what is often seen as a military-first approach by the United States and former colonial power France.
Look, these partnerships that we have, it's not something that we're imposing on anyone. Countries choose to be partners or not. And in the case of Niger, we've had this partnership for a long time. It's one that we deeply value and deeply appreciate, but it also goes to the benefit of Niger, it goes to the benefit of other countries, because information that we are able to develop as a result of our engagement and presence, that's something that's useful to everyone.
Blinken's statement comes in the context of the decline of the French influence in the Sahel and the growing official and popular rejection of the French presence in the region following the failure of its various military operations to neutralize terrorist organizations.
That's what you see Niger doing, including dealing with problems of violent extremism and terrorism, but also security more generally, is taking this holistic approach, focused on development, focused on good governance, focused on building institutions, focused on giving people opportunity. And the fact that Niger, which is obviously one of the poorest countries on earth, is doing this so effectively, I think only underscores the importance of taking this comprehensive approach.
This was a reason for several African countries to diversify their political, economic, and security partnerships. The American call to adopt an integrated policy to combat terrorism in the Sahel region intersects with the vision of Algeria in particular, which has often argued in favor of providing developmental solutions supported by the rejection of religious extremism in order to eliminate terrorism in the region.
Still with African news, South African President Cyril Ramaphosa and his Tanzanian counterpart Samia Suluhu Hassan, on a visit to Pretoria, reiterated their country's support to the Sahrawi people's right to self-determination and organization of referendum in Western Sahara, occupied by Morocco. Here's Zahra Farjani with more.
Western Sahara keeps on making diplomatic victories and strengthening the positions of African countries, pleading for its people to free the Sahrawis from illegal occupation of the Moroccan forces. South Africa and Tanzania reaffirmed their support for the Sahrawi self-determination in a joint statement that followed the visit of Tanzanian President Samia Suluhu Hassan to Pretoria by holding the referendum in accordance with the decisions of the African Union and the United Nations.
We also had an opportunity to exchange views on regional, continental, and global issues of mutual interest. Among others, we reaffirmed our shared resolve to ensure that the people of Western Sahara are able to exercise their right to self-determination. We will resist any efforts to frustrate the legitimate aspirations of the Sahrawi people or to diminish their standing within the African Union.
The pivotal African support for the Sahrawi issue comes after Kenya, Angola and South Sudan reiterated their support to Western Sahara. This confirms the African leaders and people's loyalty to the principles of liberation and ending the last occupation of the African continent. The Sahrawi issue gained international, political, diplomatic and judicial recognition from more than 80 countries around the world, as well as the United Nations bodies and committees led by the Special Committee of Decolonization. The Polisario Front, however, insists that the struggle continues until the independence is taken from the Moroccan occupation.
Prime Minister of the Sahrawi Arab Democratic Republic, Bouchraya Hamoudi Bayoun, explained that Moroccan regime's illegal acts have been exposed after the humiliating Maroc Gate scandal that put the Moroccan regime in question. Sahrawi Prime Minister also called on the European Parliament to revise the previous international positions taken in favor of the Makhzen regime.
الجميع يعرف على أن المغرب مختص في الغش في الكذب في التزوير.
Everybody knows that the Moroccan regime is specialized in fraud and lying, and they have sacrificed all what they have to destabilize the Sahrawi people. Thus, all of the decisions and positions that have been taken by the European Union were a result of bribery and fraud with the European parliamentary groups. Now we call on the European Parliament to revise all the positions which were taken in favor of Morocco, because they were against the international legitimacy.
In a related context, Moroccan human rights bodies and organizations have condemned the security forces' raids on a college in Casablanca in order to stop student activity and prevent it by using violence against students, which left many injuries of varying severity among them. Salman Asib reports.
The Makhzen system does not see anything wrong in breaking into universities, using security forces as Trojan horses and as a mean to assault young people. This is not anything different from what's happening in the street, which bear witness to many violations of human rights. Repression is the answer to anyone who speaks up against injustice and hunger faced by Moroccan or even students in this case.
Moment after violating the university campus, Makhzen forces of repression even more than that. They use excessive violence in many areas by reaching many universities, as their goal was to destroy them all completely.
In a country that stands for fighting against any types of violence on women, a country that stands for the well-being of women physically and mentally. However, today we have seen security forces assaulting, kicking a lot of women by pulling their hijab.
However, during the 17th Student Forum, many voices of condemnation were collected, which was followed by strikes, as the Geneva Council for Rights and Freedoms condemned the use of Moroccan security forces to stop all acts of violence. For its part, the National Union of Moroccan Students said that the security forces expelled students and used excessive force, leaving many of them wounded and others with many serious injuries. And according to these footages of assault and violation that many students, professors and jurists describe it as a scandalous act within universities. It's worth noting that human rights movement did not pass through one societal problem without finding solutions. As an example, human rights movements were the voice and the reason to stop assaulting Moroccan students, while the Moroccan regime chose to stay silent.
To a different development now. After 11 years of diplomatic rupture between Cairo and Ankara, another step towards mending relations has been taken when Ankara's top diplomat visited Cairo on Saturday. Egyptian Foreign Minister Sameh Shoukry affirmed that talks with Turkey on the possibility of restoring ties to ambassadorial level would happen at the appropriate time, while the Turkish top diplomat Mevlut Çavuşoğlu announced that Turkey would upgrade its diplomatic relations with Egypt to ambassador level as soon as possible.
For sure, there is a political will and directives from the presidents of the two countries when they met in Doha to assign both ministers to launch the path towards a full normalization of relations after the development over the past years.
Yes, our relations were cut off for a while, and I think there are lessons that we can learn from this. We may have disputes in the upcoming process, which is very natural between brothers, but whatever happens, we will do everything necessary as both sides not to rupture our ties in the future.
Zionist Occupation Forces stormed the village of Ta'anak, west of Jenin, according to Palestinian news outlets. The occupying forces stormed the village and launched a campaign of searching and raid. No arrests have been reported so far. Meanwhile, 5 Palestinians were injured on Saturday after the Zionist forces shot 5 bullets at them during confrontations west of Ramallah. The Zionist forces also fired stun grenades and toxic tear gas towards Palestinian citizens. Still with Palestine, the Secretary of the Palestinian Executive Committee, the PLO, Hassan Sheikh, confirmed that his country's delegation will participate on Sunday in the Sharm el-Sheikh summit as an effort to defend Palestinian rights and stop Zionist aggression that increased lately. Islam Sid reports.
The Palestinian Authority will participate in the second summit, which takes place in Sharm el-Sheikh, as a continuous effort to stop the Palestinian bloodshed and violations by the Zionist entity. The participation of the Palestinian Authority was announced by the Secretary of the Executive Committee of the Palestine Liberation Organization, Hassan al-Sheikh, on Twitter.
The Palestinian delegation will participate tomorrow in the Sharm el-Sheikh meeting with regional and international presence to defend the rights of our Palestinian people to freedom and independence, to demand an end to this continuous Israeli aggression, to demand an end to this continuous Zionist aggression against us, and to stop all measures and policies that violate our blood, land, property, and sanctities.
Sharm el-Sheikh meeting comes after the failure of the Aqaba summit in Jordan that saw no results due to the insistence of the fascist government of Netanyahu on continuing its cruel policies against the Palestinians, including settlements and homes demolition. At the Aqaba summit, the Zionist minister Itman Ben-Gvir has stated that what was in Jordan will remain in Jordan, placed as a proof of Netanyahu government's contradiction that it had committed itself to the Palestinian side to free settlements construction and stop its aggression against Palestinians in the occupied West Bank. Furthermore, media reports said that the occupation army has a list of Palestinians it wants to kill or detain before and during the holy month of Ramadan. It is a usual sign of defiance and treason by the Zionist entity, who keeps launching its threats against Palestinians of jailing and exterminating them. Ahead of the Sharm el-Sheikh summit, since the beginning of this year, the Zionist forces killed nearly 90 Palestinians, including children and women.
Ahead of the upcoming summit between the Russian and Chinese presidents, Washington expressed its fear of a counterproductive escalation with Beijing, as NBC reported, quoting U.S. officials, that the White House has sought in recent weeks to moderate its rhetoric about the possibility of China supplying weapons to Russia in Ukraine. The officials stated that the aim of this change in tone is to reduce escalating tensions, especially before the upcoming summit between the two presidents, on which the war in Ukraine will be at the top of the agenda. Strengthening economic cooperation between Beijing and Moscow will be the most prominent file on Putin's table in Xi Jinping's first foreign visit after his re-election as president of China for a third term. As both countries' leaders aspire to raise the value of inter-trade exchanges to $200 billion around 2024, after it exceeded $190 billion last year. Ukraine announced on Saturday that it had been subjected to a barrage of explosive drones that reached the Lviv region. The Ukrainian Air Force indicated in a statement on Twitter that at 9 o'clock last night, the Russians attacked Ukraine with Iranian-made suicide attack drones of types 103 and 131, adding that 11 out of the 16 aircraft were destroyed. And according to the Air Force, the attack was launched from the Sea of Azov and the Russian region of Bryansk, bordering Ukraine. Russian President Vladimir Putin visited Crimea on Saturday on the 9th anniversary of its accession to Russia. And it is Putin's first visit to Crimea since the start of the war in Ukraine on February 24th of last year. Putin arrived in Sevastopol, the main port of the Russian Black Sea Fleet in Crimea. He attended the inauguration ceremony of a children's art school accompanied by the local governor, Mikhail Razgovkayev, I'm saying. All right, moving on. Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan announced on Saturday the extension of the Ukrainian grain export deal corridor agreement through the Black Sea ports. During a speech he delivered in the city of Çanakkale, located in the west of the country, according to Erdogan, Turkish talks with the Russian and Ukrainian sides finally secured the extension of the agreement, which was scheduled to expire today. Therefore, Ukraine expressed support for extending the agreement by suggesting at least 120 days or until further notice.
It's well known that the period of the grain corridor deal was one of the main agreement points between Russia and Ukraine after the war, other than the prisoner exchange, which was expiring today. As a result of our talks with the two sides, we have secured an extension to this deal, which was ending on the 19th of March.
Supporters of ex-Pakistan Prime Minister Imran Khan clashed with police outside an Islamabad court on Saturday, as Khan was expected to address the court regarding charges of unlawfully selling state gifts given to him by foreign dignitaries while in office. Khan's standoff with the government has led to intense clashes with his supporters. Earlier this week, police and Khan supporters clashed outside his home during an attempted arrest, while other clashes occurred in front of the courtroom in Islamabad.
Why to put me in jail? It is part of London plan. It is Nawaz Sharif's demand to put Imran Khan in jail so that he may not take part in the elections. They are going to do it. I know they're going to arrest me. Despite knowing this, I'm going there because I believe in rule of law. But I want to tell the nation that the intention of these thieves, these rulers and their facilitators has been exposed. Intent was never the law in this country. They have imposed the law of the jungle here.
To Europe now, French parties opposed to the Pension Age Reform Act submitted a motion of no confidence in the government to Parliament, which followed Prime Minister Elisabeth Borne's use of special constitutional powers to enforce the act without the approval of Parliament, with the permission of President Emmanuel Macron. Meanwhile, protests throughout France continued on Saturday and turned violent amid anger at the government pushing through the pension issue without a parliamentary vote.
I don't agree at all with the reform. My son who went through his studies, I don't want him to work until he's 67 or 68 years old, as he'll have to have done 176 trimesters. If you do your math, you'll see.
To some economy news now, the SVB and Signature Bank collapse were felt across Europe. Most of EU states still worried despite the US authorities' special decisive measures to protect depositors' funds and President Joe Biden's promise to take serious action to ensure the safety of the US banking system. During the start of a Eurogroup finance ministers meeting in Brussels on Monday, Belgium and France finance ministers said both countries' banks are not at risk from contagion from the two American banks' collapse.
Well, we don't see a specific risk of contagion. Of course, we are monitoring the situation in close contact with the ECB. We appreciate, we take note of the initiative taken by the U.S. authorities to avoid in U.S. a contagion. And also we stress the fact that European banks, all European banks, not only the bigger, are applying the prudential Basel standard. So directly there is no contagion. The possibility of indirect impact is something that we have to monitor, but at the moment we don't see it as a significant risk.
And finally, to some sports news. The Algerian team, JS Kabylie, managed to go to the quarterfinals of the African Champions League competition on Saturday after defeating the Angolan Petro Atletico with a goal without a reply in a match that was hosted in the July 5th stadium. The only goal in the match was scored by player Dadi Mawaki in the 19th minute. The victory put the Algerian team at the top of the first group with 10 points, qualifying for the quarterfinals. And Shabab Belouizdad beat the Egyptian Zamalek 2-0 at the 5th July Olympic Stadium. The Algerian football team secured its third consecutive presence at the African Championship quarterfinal and continue its African adventure, looking for the first title and first Algerian title since 2014. The goals of the fixture were scored by the midfielder Zakaria Draoui in the 75th minute and Cameroonian forward Lionel Wamba in the 79th minute. And with this, we reach the end of our program. For more, you can always visit our social media platforms. Don't forget to check them out. From me and the rest of the team, thank you for tuning in, and bye for now.